YouTube friends and enemies, I suppose. Hope you're having a great day. Just had something I wanted to talk about. Been just finished reading Vladimir Nabokov's lectures on literature. He gave quite a few of these actually. He's got another one on Russian literature and Don Quixote, things like that. But this was fantastic. I almost enjoy reading commentary on literature more than the literature itself. Probably just because it's easier to do. You can kind of read a few pages, come back to it later, kind of a thing. Um, Harold Bloom, he's probably my favorite one to read. Not to be confused with Howard Bloom, who is also excellent, or Leopold Bloom, who is quite a character as well. Or is it, what's his name? Is it Paul Bloom? The language professor at Yale? I don't know. There's a lot of Blooms. And of course, In Bloom is I'm not going to say fantastic, be lazy about it, is a wonderful heavy-hitting rockin' song by the band Nirvana. But anyways, there was one particular part in here that I wanted to go over. Ideally, I'd like to just read this whole thing, but it's a fair little bit. I don't know, it's a few pages. It'd get kind of bogged down, so I'm just going to hit the highlights. It's The Art of Literature and Common Sense. And in this, Nabokov kind of gets into things that are, I don't know, I guess similar to what I've been talking about, the difference between artistry and craftsmanship. It's not an exact overlay, but it's kind of a parallel idea. We'll get into that in just a second. I did like, though, he starts out this little lecture on the benefits of an artist secluding themselves in, as he calls it, the much abused Ivory Tower. A place where he can be to focus on his art, almost in a literal sense, too. This is thus a pleasant and cool place with a grand circular view and plenty of books and lots of useful gadgets. So, yeah, it kind of goes to what I was saying about how it's important to get your surroundings in tune with your artistic process. Make it be something that's conducive to creating things, whatever that might be, according to your own personality type. Of course, might be different for each person. But anyways, here's a great paragraph here, getting into the meat of this. It's his takedown of common sense, which is crucial for all great art, and you can see somewhat why. I'm going to read this whole paragraph. In the fall of 1811, Noah Webster, working steadily through the seas, defined common sense as good, sound, ordinary sense, free from emotional bias or intellectual subtlety. Horse sense. This is rather a flattering view of the creature, for the biography of common sense makes nasty reading. Common sense has trampled down many a gentle genius whose eyes had delighted in a too early moonbeam of some too early truth. Common sense has back-kicked dirt at the loveliest of queer paintings, because a blue tree seemed madness to its well-meaning hoof. Common sense has prompted ugly but strong nations to crush their fair but frail neighbors the moment a gap in history offered a chance that it would have been ridiculous not to exploit. Common sense is fundamentally immoral, for the natural morals of mankind are as irrational as the magic rites that they evolved since the immemorial dimness of time. Common sense, at its worst, is sense made common, and so everything is comfortably cheapened by its touch. Common sense is square, whereas all the most essential visions and values of life are beautifully round as the universe or the eyes of a child at its first circus show. So yeah, really shows us where our priorities should be, at least from an artistic sense. And of course, getting on my hobby horse, not my horse sense, but my hobby horse, of decrying the meagerness of ideas in most modern art, certainly modern music. Um, yeah, I think this really is in support of that. Yeah, at common sense at its worst is sense made common, and so everything is comfortably cheapened by its touch. That's what most of this music is. It's just common music. It's sensible music. Yeah, it sounds good. It's the easiest way to make music using the latest technology and allowing the technology to do most of the work for you. It'll please the ear at a, you know, casual listen. Why waste your time coming up with something like a blue tree that's just going to cause people to look askance at it, or listen askance if that's a thing. But anyways, he goes a lot more into this common sense theme. You really want to read it for yourself. I'm gonna skip over though to the thing that I most enjoyed about this, which is the closest parallel to the artist versus craftsman argument. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Well, kind of. He goes on to talk about the difference between genius and madness. I think we can all guess what madness is. Madness can be something that can be appreciated from a distance almost as much as genius. Just the chaos of it, I suppose. But there is a difference. Notice what he says. Madness is but a diseased bit of common sense, whereas genius is the greatest sanity of the spirit. He goes on to say that lunatics are lunatics just because they have thoroughly and recklessly dismembered a familiar world but have not the power, or have lost the power, to create a new one as harmonious as the old. The artist, on the other hand, disconnects what he chooses, and while doing so he is aware that something in him is aware of the final result. When he examines his completed masterpiece, he perceives that whatever unconscious cerebration had been involved in the creative plunge, this final result is the outcome of a definite plan which had been contained in the initial shock as the future development of a live creature said to be contained in the genes of its germ cell. So it's not just happenstance, it's not just an accident. The ending result is preconceived. And he talks about the passage from the dissociative stage to the associative one is thus marked by a kind of spiritual thrill, which in English is very loosely termed inspiration. This is crucial, that inspiration. Anybody with a working knowledge of of a computer or even a musical instrument can do a work a day, crank out some sort of a musical product. Is it inspired? Is there a spiritual thrill that initiates it? And he goes on to into various examples of what could be considered these sorts of inspirations. But I wanted to get into an awesome point he made here. And this is where we kind of get into that parallel of the arts and crafts theme. It says the Russian language, which otherwise is comparatively poor in abstract terms, supplies definitions for two types of inspiration. I'm going to butcher this pronunciation. I did try to look up something to help me, some diacritics or YouTube video where I could get it pronounced, and couldn't find anything. So I put a good 2.5 minutes into that, so I apologize if this isn't correct. But the two types of inspiration are Vostorg and Vdokhnovenie, which can be which can be paraphrased as rapture and recapture. The difference between them is mainly of a climatic kind, the first being hot and brief, the second cool and sustained. The kind alluded to up to now is the pure flame of Vostorg, initial rapture, which has no conscious purpose in view, but which is all important in linking the breaking up of the old world with the building up of the new one. And of course he's talking about writing here, but this applies to music as well, or painting, or anything. When the time is ripe and the writer settles down to the actual composing of his book, he will rely on the second serene and steady kind of inspiration, Vdokhnovenie, the trusted mate who helps to recapture and reconstruct the world. The force and originality involved in the primary spasm of inspiration is directly proportional to the worth of the book the author will write. That cannot be overemphasized. It's the same with music. There needs to be that primary spasm of inspiration. Like with Paul McCartney, he has the dream for Yesterday, Scrambled Eggs. That's the primary spasm of inspiration. This can come in all different forms. Even as a joke, going back to the Nirvana thing, Kurt Cobain, that riff for Smells Like Teen Spirit. On the front it sounds rather derivative, and they played it as a joke. But it was inspired, and that's why it stayed on the album. Why they were able to work through it in the serene and steady kind of inspiration that turned it into a fully fleshed song. He goes on to say, at the bottom of the scale, a very mild kind of thrill can be experienced by a minor writer noticing, say, the interconnection between a smoking factory chimney, a stunted lilac bush in the yard, and a pale-faced child. But the combination is so simple, the threefold symbol so obvious, the bridge between the images so well worn by the feet of literary pilgrims and by cartloads of standard ideas, and the world to do so very like the average one that the work of fiction set into motion will be necessarily of modest worth. So here he's putting things into very distinct classes, that some works of art, some works of literature are worth more than others. This is also true of music. I think everybody recognizes this, but when they make these assertions that certain kinds of modern music are the equivalent of some classic version of rock or classical music, they could be, but you need to properly make the case for it. And when you imply that they're more or less, the latest version of that older thing, you're implying that they're of similar worth. Or if you're not meaning to imply that, maybe that's not the intention, but that is what comes across. And a very severe distinction needs to be made, recognizing that there is a difference there. Or if there isn't a difference, like I said, you have to make a strong argument for it. But most of these modern compositions, if we'll call them that, especially in pop music, which people say, well, it's pop, what do you expect? Well, there was a lot of amazing stuff in pop music in the past, so... But yeah, they've all fallen into this obvious, well-worn, standard ideas, average one, modest worth. That's what we're left with. And this Vdokhnovenie, this steady kind of inspiration, serene and steady, which is what takes the initial primary spasm and turns it into the completed work. That's kind of what I would liken to the craftsmanship. I don't think it's exactly the same thing, but it's that ability to work through the process and make a quality work. That's necessary, and some modern music does show some skill in that regard, but extremely rare to have that primary inspiration. You almost never see it, and if it is, it's a modest inspiration, as he brought out there. So, anyways, I very much recommend your reading, because I'm probably butchering the meaning of half of this stuff, Nabokov's The Art of Literature in Common Sense. I just thought that was something nice to dwell on for today. Anyways, take care.